Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. But the other story that came out on Thursday that became official is something that we have long talked about on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, and that is the Big Ten TV deal is now official. Now, it's important to note, I don't think there were any real details that came out on Thursday that were really all that different than what we talked about previously. But what I will say is that, as I often say on this show, the story isn't the surface level stuff, right? Like, I don't think a Purdue fan cares that they now can't watch their game on ESPN and got to watch them on CBS. But instead, it's the story behind the story. And as I've told you before, I do think this Big Ten TV contract has big-time ripple effects on the rest of college football as well as the Big Ten, and that is what I want to get to, and really some new thoughts on top of some of the stuff that we've already discussed. Now, first of all, very, very quickly, because we've gone over it, here are the details. Here's what you need to know if you are a Big Ten fan. If you love punting and running between the tackles, you are going to be in heaven come 2024, because here is what the TV schedule will look like. Noon Eastern time, Fox has that marquee game. 3:30, used to be the SEC on CBS. Sayonara, Nick Saban. See you later, Kirby Smart. Brett Bielema and Jeff Brom are coming to town, baby. That is right. PJ Fleck is rowing that boat right into the 3:30 time slot on CBS. And then the 7 p.m. Eastern time slot. Every week we'll have a Big Ten game on NBC. Thought it was kind of an interesting note. This is the first time that there is ever one specific spot reserved for Big Ten football, so that's kind of a cool, interesting little caveat there. There will be the occasional game streamed on Peacock, but that is essentially what you need to know. Peacock, for people who do not know, is the NBC streaming service, but the big games are going to be on Big TV, and the Big Ten got big money for it. We have seen the reports, but when you put pen to paper on Thursday, it was pretty astronomical. It was a 7-year deal with all three networks for $8 billion. Did a little back-of-the-envelope math. That comes out to like $1.14 billion per year for the league, which comes out to, on average, like $71.5 million per year per school. Now, that's a little bit of a twisted, because a lot of the contracts are backloaded. The SEC technically, or the CBS technically has the SEC for one more year before they really jump full speed into the Big Ten. So it's not perfect back-of-the-envelope math, but essentially $71 million per year per school. So you got a school like Clemson in the ACC competing for national championships, and then you got a school like Minnesota in the Big Ten that's nowhere close, that's probably making twice as much money. So those are the numbers, and I think we all know that. But here's just some, I wrote down about 4 or 5 thoughts that I had on what Thursday's news meant for college football as a whole. First of all, as I've discussed the last couple weeks, I think I briefly touched on it, Aaron right, Aaron wrong. I got to give Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, credit here, okay? Because when Kevin Warren was given the Big Ten commissioner job like a month before COVID started, and he didn't know anybody, he didn't know the conference presidents and athletic directors and all that stuff. COVID hits, things get shut down, and I thought he looked really weak during COVID. Kind of got pushed around. Remember all those school presidents with tweed jackets? Remember Mark Schlissel from Michigan? Yeah, the Michigan president, if you don't remember him, he resigned because of some sexual misconduct allegations. Neither here nor there. You can Google that. But I thought Kevin Warren looked really weak during COVID. But as I said last week, my first takeaway is I'm actually very impressed by Kevin Warren, okay? And I think it proves that everybody in life has some kind of different strengths and weaknesses. And what we saw from Kevin Warren was that, for people who do not know, he came from the NFL, and he had very much an NFL mindset when it came to putting together this TV package. First of all, credit to him. He got his schools the most possible money, and at the end of the day, that is his job. Get your schools as much cash as you possibly can. Beyond that, though, the 3 different TV networks thing is very interesting, and it's very much an NFL model. And we all watch the NFL on Saturday. We are on Sunday, excuse me. We all pay attention to all these different games, and it is not uncommon for a 4 o'clock CBS game from Foxborough Jim Nantz and Tony Romo to be promoting the Monday night game on ESPN, or the 1 o'clock Fox game to be promoting a next Thursday night's game on Amazon, whatever. And that is really what the NFL has created, this kind of situation where everybody is promoting everything else for the good of the NFL. And that's why I love this TV contract from the Big Ten's perspective. Because now you're going to tune into Fox, and Fox is going to be saying, hey, when we're done, switch over to CBS, because if you think Ohio State and Penn State is great right now, we got Michigan USC at 3:30 on CBS. And from a branding and marketing perspective, that is so big and so important and so huge, let alone the fact that all three of those networks, CBS, Fox, NBC, at least right now, also have the NFL. So we'll know in advance what the next week's games are going to be, and you will be watching Sunday Night Football on, Packers 49ers or whatever, and they're going to be promoting the Ohio State-Wisconsin game the following week. And so I give Kevin Warren credit because, yes, it's about the money and the dollars and the cents, and they've moved ahead the SEC. But beyond that, it's about the marketing and promotion. And as somebody who, and I talk about this a lot, but as somebody who's recently started my own business, I'm always trying to think of ways to expand and this and that. And how can I get people talking about me? Well, what better way than to have three major broadcast networks talking about the Big Ten constantly because they are all financially invested. I also think it's worth noting as well, the Big Ten championship game will now be split up between NBC, Fox, and CBS. So another reason for all three of those networks to stay invested all year, because every third year, I guess it would be, they'll have the conference championship game. Think that's big, think that's huge. Before we move on, by the way, one last thing. I got a little pushback last time when I talked about the Big Ten TV contract because they're like, yeah, but I mean, if you're not on ESPN, nobody's going to talk about you. Shut up. That is the dumbest. No disrespect to anybody who listens to this podcast. I appreciate each and every one of your support. But please stop telling me that the Big Ten not being on ESPN is going to hurt them on the national landscape. One, it's exactly what I just said. You're going to have three different networks talking about you during the most watched, most viewed events every single week, which are called NFL games. So there's that. And two, I got this. People were like, well, they're not on ESPN. What does it mean for their coverage? One, first of all, I don't think anybody goes to ESPN anymore, and it's not disrespect. I don't think you're waiting until the 11 o'clock Sports Center to see what Kirk Herbstreit has to say about Ohio State or Alabama or Penn State or USC. If you want reaction to whatever's going on in college football, you have podcasts like this. You have YouTube streams. You have live streams. You have all sorts of good stuff. You have plenty of places to go to hear and listen to college football. I don't think it really matters all that much that they're not on ESPN. And two, let's not act like ESPN isn't going to talk about Ohio State. Like they're not going to show Ohio State highlights if they're number one or number two in the country. So that's just ridiculous. So that's my first takeaway. Just credit Kevin Warren. I thought he showed why he was hired for this job. Obviously, again, didn't think he was strong during COVID, but everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. He showed just how good of a businessman and negotiator he is here. Second big takeaway, I got to say this. I think this is the first time since Greg Sankey took over as commissioner of the SEC. I think he kind of got his pants pulled down a little bit here in terms of the Big Ten's TV contract versus the SEC's TV contract. Now, the first thing I'll say, the Big Ten's making a little bit more. I saw this today. People were like, the SEC is starting to fall behind a little bit. It's like, please stop with the SEC is falling behind. Like, everybody's making a ton of money in the SEC. We're not talking about the Mountain West here. Like, if Georgia needs to add a new analyst to their staff, it's not like Kirby Smart is going to be going hands and knees to his athletic director begging for help. If Kentucky needs to update its a smoothie bar, Mark Stoops already won that war with John Cass. So, the point I'm trying to make, this idea that the SEC somehow fell behind because they're making like $8 million less a year when everybody's clearing 60+ in the Big Ten and the SEC, just stop. But where I do think Greg Sankey, I don't think this was the smartest move, and I think it shows really the difference between Kevin Warren coming from the NFL and Greg Sankey being in college his entire career. For people who don't know, by the way, I should mention the SEC in 2020, after they sealed the deal with Texas and Oklahoma, or I guess it was technically a little bit after, but whatever. They signed an exclusive deal. All their games are on ESPN, ABC. Obviously, the SEC network is owned by ESPN. They signed a massive deal. It's about $300 million a year, whatever it ends up being. It's a lot of money for all these schools. I saw Billy Napier kind of said something to the effect of $60+ million a year. So it's not so much the money thing. But I do think, again, if Greg Sankey had to do it over, I don't know that sticking with one single partner is the best possible move. Because, one, it completely eliminates the exposure on the other networks. Obviously, CBS, NBC, Fox, now they have no incentive to talk SEC football. Now, to go back to the previous point, it's not as though people are going to pretend like Alabama doesn't play or pretend like Texas A&M or Georgia or LSU or Florida don't play. But I also sit there and say, if he had to do it over, I do think, that second tier, third tier, fourth tier package, whatever it is, sell it to somebody else. One, you're just going to get more money. Two, you're going to get other people talking about you. So that's the first part. But here's the other part where I think Greg Sankey, if he had to do it over again, I'm not sure that he would do it the way that he did. I said the terms of the Big Ten TV deal earlier. 7 years, $8 billion with a B. I sound like Dr. Evil there. $8 billion with a B. You know what? In the SEC, I should mention, I got a little sidetracked there talking Dr. Evil. The SEC's contract, as I just said, is a 10-year deal that's going to pay, over the totality, whatever, 60 whatever million per team for the contract. But why I bring it up, did you hear what I said? 7-year TV contract Big Ten, 10-year contract SEC. The Big Ten just locked in the biggest TV deal in the history of college sports, and their contract is going to be up again before the SEC's contract is up. And so, again, shrewd business move by not only Kevin Warren, but the previous commissioner of the Big Ten, Jim Delaney. They've taken these short-term deals. That's just smart business. I go to another sport for half a second, if you'll allow me. It's like Major League Baseball. I don't understand why all these players sign these insane long-term contracts. I know you want to lock in $250, $300, $400 million a year if you're a baseball player. But the market moves so fast that if you sign a contract 15 years, Juan Soto just turned down a 15-year deal. You know what salaries are going to be in 15 years from now? Bryce Harper, by the way, signed a 13-year deal to be the highest paid player in baseball. 2 weeks later, Mike Trout signs a contract and he surpasses Bryce Harper. Cool, Bryce Harper. You were the highest paid player in baseball for 2 weeks. Then you got surpassed. Now you're stuck in Philly for 13 years. Sorry, not the move that I would make. I would do the short-term deals. Carlos Correa, a player for the Minnesota Twins, did that this offseason. Signed a 3-year deal at about 25, 26. He's going to hit the market again at 29 years old and cash in again. And that is what the Big Ten did on Thursday. To bring it back to college football, that random baseball rant, you probably were thrown off there. But that's what the Big Ten did on Thursday. The Big Ten got their money now, and they're going to go back to the negotiating table before the SEC does. And so you think the Big Ten has lapped the SEC now? Wait until, 2031, 2032, when that new contract is up? They're going to leaps and bounds. Now, at least to Greg Sankey's credit, it's not that ACC contract that's through 2036. But I think if Greg Sankey had to do it over, he would have made a shorter deal, multiple networks. I think committing 10 years in this landscape when you have a property as valuable as the SEC, I just don't think it's smart business. Finally, a couple other news and notes. I've seen differing things on what the Big Ten stuff means for the future of the Pac-12. It was interesting. On Thursday, we learned that there is what they call an escalator clause in the contract between the Big Ten and these TV networks. In other words, saying that if another round of realignment happens, that the Big Ten can renegotiate. Now, I saw a lot of people say, oh, that's terrible news. Nobody in the Pac-12 is going to commit. It goes back to what I said a few weeks ago. If the Big Ten wanted anybody in the Pac-12, any of those remaining 10 schools, they would have had them by now. Now, it doesn't make the Pac-12's job any easier, but if the Big Ten wanted Cal, wanted Stanford, wanted Oregon, wanted Washington, they would have already had them. And so I think a lot of people saw this escalator clause and thought it was this big thing. I don't really think it's much of anything. I don't know that it fundamentally changes the details of this contract. And I don't think anything really happens without Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, as I told you, I was ahead on this. I was the only one. If you don't think I'm going to be talking about it and where Aaron was right, where Aaron was wrong coming up, you don't know your boy Torres. But I told you, I said Notre Dame's going to stay independent. Everybody else is saying this is going to push them to the Big Ten. They don't care about the most possible money. They care about having enough money to compete, and they're going to get that from NBC in like a $60 million a year range. And so I only bring it up because I think from the Big Ten's perspective, I think I saw a lot of people say, well, it's only a matter of time before they poach more Pac-12 schools. Well, why didn't they just do it right now? Why go through all the work of getting all these deals done with 3 different networks just to be in a scenario where in a year from now or in 6 months from now, you're trying to renegotiate? I don't think this changes anything. Notre Dame is going to recommit to Notre Dame. Notre Dame is going to recommit to NBC. And I think from the Pac-12's perspective, I don't think the Big Ten is all that interested. Now, if everything flails in the wind, if the Pac-12 can't get anything done long-term, and we're a year from now, we're 2 years from now, and everything's still floating in the wind, then that's a little bit of a different deal. But right now, this second, I don't see any of these Pac-12 schools leaving for the Big Ten. If they wanted to do it, they should have just done it right now. And so I think George Kliakov, Kliakov, I don't know how to say his name, the Pac-12 commissioner, it's go time, man. I understand you're not in the right situation, but the Big Ten TV contract is done. I don't think they're ripping it up tomorrow to add Cal and Stanford. It is on you, my man. Get your stuff done. Get things done, because I think now is the window. Now is the time where you got to get this done. You got to lock your schools in. And by the way, you know what might be the pitch for the Pac-12? Hey, you don't have to commit long-term. They sign a 7-year deal. Let's us sign a 7-year deal. Let's see where they are a couple of years from now. I don't think you're going to get any of these Pac-12 schools to commit to something more than 7 years. But I do think, as I've said a few times, I think the Pac-12 right now remains a better option for most of these schools than trying to go to the Big 12 or trying to go somewhere else. It's on the commissioner to get things done right now. All right, that's what I want to do. I do want to take a quick break. I do want to come back. We will wrap our Friday show. Aaron right, Aaron wrong. I think we'll hit on a couple fun stories from the week that I just haven't had a chance to get to on this show. We'll talk a little bit about some NFL preseason stuff. We'll talk some of these college sports stories that we've hit on. An update on Bronny James. Ooh, if that isn't a tease, I don't know what is. Stay tuned. Take a quick break. I'll be right back.